Hey guys, I'm Sam Luce here with Safari Pedals, bringing you a brand new plugin. This is the Dragon EQ. Now, this is an EQ that is not like many EQs that I personally have seen before. It's kind of threefold. So yeah, it's a standard EQ. You've got low, mid, and high with sweepable bands, so you can use it as, you know, a standard EQ. But then it's got drive on it as well. And you've got multi-band drive. You can have different amounts of drive, of kind of saturation for lows, mids, and highs. That's different, that's cool. But also, the kicker is it works in mid-side. So you can just add some high-end and some high-end saturation to just the sides, or some low-end saturation to just the center channel, the mid channel. So there's a few things to kind of go over here. Best thing we can do is just jump in and take a look.
It's all about that muscle, dog, yeah. Trying to make it out the struggle, dog, yeah. Hey, watch out, this shit bubble, dog, yeah. It's all about that muscle, dog, yeah. Trying to make it.
So here is Dragon EQ with the familiar funky interfaces we know from Safari pedals. We've got our low gain, mid gain, high gain. So that's on these knobs here. And then we've got low frequency goes from 18 Hertz all the way up to 200. Mid frequency going from 180 all the way up to 7K. And then high frequency going from 4K all the way up to 22K. And I can just reset those by Alt or Option clicking. And then we've got oversampling, which we've known to kind of expect from the Safari stuff. Anytime we've got any saturation or drive involved, then oversampling is great because it's going to stop any aliasing happening at those super high frequencies. And we've got the low and mid and high drive amounts, so we can bring those up on a percentage, and those are completely independent. And then we've got the mid side as well. So this plugin actually works in parallel. So the saturation is actually happening kind of on top of the signal. And when we dig deep into this, we're going to see why that's kind of important and why it leads to a slightly more kind of natural sound, but also something that's got loads of character and can really add some punch to your tracks. So first of all, let's cover the EQ side of it, then we'll go to the saturation, then we'll go to the mid side stuff. So I've actually got a curve analyzer, which is going to tell me exactly what all the EQ points are doing. And you'll see that if I turn up the low end, it's going to be applying a low shelf and a slight dip just above. And that's kind of a familiar sort of low end trick, like you'll see that in sort of pull text and stuff. It helps to stop muddying up all those low mids when you're boosting the low end. So we can take that down to maybe say 60 Hertz, and you'll see that it's just giving us a nice low end bump. And the more that we go up, the more that that dip is going to kind of dip, I guess. So we're going to get loads of low end, we're going to get a nice rounded bottom end, but none of that kind of muddiness that we can sometimes get from traditional EQs. Going to reset that and go to the mids. Now this is a fairly broad mid boost, and it's going to be centered around the frequency that you choose. So at the moment I've got, where am I, 3.5K, and it's the thing you need to remember about kind of analog mode EQs is that if it says 3.5K, it's not necessarily going to be exactly 3.5K. It's about the sound, it's about the feel, but this is going to sweep around wherever we kind of do it. And then if we do a dip, then it's going to do a kind of a broad dip there as well, and it's not a sharp EQ, it's more of a kind of a rounded EQ. And then on the high frequency, this is an interesting one. If we bring up those high frequencies, we'll see that those low frequencies come down as well. So this is kind of like a little bit of a tilt EQ. When we bring up the high frequencies, the low frequencies will come down a small amount. And this helps clean things up if we're really going for some high-end, high-frequency information. But we can just bring up that low end as well, and we can bring that back to normal, or we can bring up that boost, and we're going to get this cut in the kind of low-mid range to stop any of that muddying. So the best thing we can do is we can take a listen to it and see exactly what these different bands are doing and how the saturation, how the drive is actually going to affect these bands. So let's take a listen to it. Let's add some lows. Bring in some highs. Really sweet sounding highs. Let's bring in some of this high frequency drive. I'm just kind of hearing it getting crispy. So as with almost all of the Safari pedals plugins, it's all about vibe, it's all about the sound. It's not about like surgical stuff, it's about getting stuff that sounds fun and is fun to use. And when you take this high drive off, when you take the drive away from that part of the signal, then it just kind of loses a bit of character. And this drum track is already on the crunchy side of things, I would have said. So adding a little bit more crunch in the high frequencies is really adding some grit, and vibe is the best word I can use to describe it. Let's do the same thing for the low end. Now, if you're on phone speakers or something like that, you may not hear it quite as well. So I'd recommend a set of speakers or a pair of headphones for this one. Let's take the high drive off and just go for the low end. So I'm going to go for, let's go for something around kind of 80 hertz, just so you've got more chance of hearing it on smaller speakers. So we're already boosted there. Take it off. And then that's drive that bottom end. Without it. Really crunching it up. Do the same thing for the mids. Really getting crunchy. Without. Hear it on that cross stick. Just gets a load more life to it, and it really is about the vibe, the grit, the crunch, the drive, whatever kind of word you want to use, that's what it's doing. And these drive controls do work independently of the EQ boost itself. So just because you're not adding any mid-range, it doesn't mean that the mid-drive is not going to do anything. It's still going to drive up that mid-range. It's still going to give it some aggression, some kind of saturation. But as you increase the gain, it's going to do more. It's going to put more into that kind of drive circuit. So if we go for let's go for the high frequencies actually. So let's bring that down. Let's make it so we're not boosting anything. Where are we? Let's bring it down to like 10k so we can really hear it on those cymbals. And let's just bring up the drive without any EQ boost engaged. So we're just getting nice and crunchy. But then as you bring that high gain up, it's kind of getting more pronounced in the area that you've selected. So in that 10k region, the drive is kind of affecting that area a little bit more. Let's go to another drum track and hear exactly what it's doing, because the mid-side function is really interesting. So on this track, I'm currently bypassed. I've got a decent amount of low-end gain happening, somewhere around 3.5, 4 dB. Mid-gain is just coming in a touch, and the high gain is pretty cranked at 12 dB. I've got no drive happening though. The drives are on, but they're not actually kind of turned up. And just listen to the difference with the plugin turned off and then it turned on, and then we're going to bring this mid-side in. So you'd hear a bit of a volume bump when I'm doing this, so I'm just going to bring the output down by like 9 dB because I'm adding loads of EQ, so just so you can get kind of an equal loudness comparison. Let's start off with the plugin bypass, and then we'll bring it in and you'll hear the kind of niceness that is adding. Really crispy. Let's bring in some of that drive. Just sizzling those highs. That really grabs hold of it. We can maybe do it a little less high, maybe a little more low. Just sounds dead without it. So whether they are the EQ point choices that you would make or not, it's kind of irrelevant. Just as a proof of concept, it's just a brightening sound, it's a fattening sound, it's a crunchy sound. It's doing kind of the stuff that we'd expect a Vibe plugin to do. But the mid-side function, this is really interesting because especially in the high frequency information, if you've got a drum kit as we have here, then the high frequency information tends to be kind of spread to the sides somewhat. You've got the overhead mics, which are traditionally kind of panned left and right. As I bring up this mid-side control, it's a percentage. So at the moment it's 50-50. So it's just doing the same amount to the mids as it is to the side. As I bring it down, it's going to do that stuff to the mid channel. And as I bring it up, it's going to do that stuff to the side channel, if that makes sense. So let's bring the control down and we'll hear it just kind of come away from the cymbals a little bit and just focus on the snare and the kick. So the kick and the snare are going to get a little bit more EQ'd and the cymbals are going to get a little bit less EQ'd. Hear how it's really affecting that kick and that snare. But as we bring this over to the right hand side, to the side channels, you're going to hear it do the opposite. It's going to really affect the cymbals and the stuff, the stereo information, but not so much the kick as we bring it all the way around to the right. And if I bypass this, it's just like a massive spread. Now this is quite extreme, just doing it to the side channel. So we've not just got like all mid or everything or all side. Because it is a rotary control, it's a percentage. So if we think that's a bit too much, which I actually do, then we can bring that down a touch and we can make it so that it's still affecting the mids a bit, but affecting the sides kind of a little bit more. Crunch that bottom end up. I love it. So the mid-side encoder is an interesting one. You can make the drive and the EQ affect the mid and side channels the same if it's in the center, or make it so that it's favoring the mid channel if you turn it around to the left, or if it's favoring the side channel turned around to the right. And that's something that I've not seen. I'm not going to say no other EQ plugin does it, because they might do. I haven't seen every single plugin in the world, but that's kind of a unique feature in my mind, and one that is worth exploring, because having this kind of multiband drive, not only being that itself multiband drive, but being able to mid-side it as well, is pretty cool. Now I've got an acoustic guitar track here, like a classical acoustic guitar, and these different EQ points are going to work on different things in different instruments. So sometimes it may be that you don't need to boost EQ, you just need to boost drive. Sometimes you don't need to boost drive, you just need to boost the EQ. To me, on an acoustic guitar like this, I like to drive the mid-range because it kind of picks up the fingers a little bit more. But if I boost the EQ, it just makes it sound kind of a little bit aggressive. But then in the high end, I like to do the opposite. I don't like to boost the drive in the high end. I like to EQ the high end. Just take a listen. So let's drive that mid-range and we'll just hear the finger picks coming out. There we go. Even at just like 28%. But on the high frequencies, if I were to drive it, then it just adds an apparent distortion. And with an instrument like this, which is quite gentle, that's not really what I want. So I'm just going to apply a high shelf to this, or as we saw, it's kind of a bit more of a tilt. And we're just going to get a little bit more of the brilliance, a little bit more of that high end. Let's bring it down to somewhere around 12k, so we're really on that high frequency stuff, and let's go for it. And if I want to bring up some body, let's go to like 200 hertz. There it is. Without. So there's not a massive amount of stereo information in this guitar, but we can just lean it a little bit more to the sides, and that means that we can bring those drive and high gains up, and it's going to just spread it out a little bit. So it's kind of increasing the stereo impact of that as well, and it's broadening it, and it's just making the whole thing brighter. But the mid-range to me is all about the drive, and with this particular instrument, the high frequency is about the gain. But it's going to differ depending on which instrument you're on, so it's worth experimenting. So there we go, Dragon EQ. It's a 3-tiered thing. It's EQ, it's drive, and it does all that in mid-side mode as well. If you want it to. You don't have to do it in mid-side, you can just have it straight up the center and it will do normal stereo. But having that there means that you can spread stuff out wide and just add another dimension to the sound. It's available now, you can check it out at safaripedals.com, as well as all the other cool stuff on there that you may have seen on the Black Friday deals, you may have seen across the site. There's a whole host of plugins on there that are going to add instant character and instant vibe and just a bit of fun to your mixes and masters. I'll see you again soon. Take care.